Hi, my name's Mark. I'm one of the pastors here at Trillium. Today we looked at a story from the Gospel of Matthew. It's about Jesus' interaction with a fig tree. It comes really pretty much right after the whole entry into Jerusalem that we celebrated a couple weeks ago, and last week we looked at Jesus going into the temple. It's the next day after that when it looks like he hasn't got a lot of sleep and he's still quite hungry, he hasn't got a lot of food. And he's wandering by this fig tree with his disciples, and he goes over looking for some food because he's hungry. He wants to get some of the fruit of the plant to eat. And there's nothing there. There's lots of leaves and all that, but there's no fruit. And in the story, it sounds like as if Jesus curses the tree because it shrivels up right in front of the disciples. And I think symbolically what's going on there is he's, in a sense, stripping the disciples' perception away and showing them the reality of the tree. Tree isn't producing any fruit. And you know what? A fig tree is supposed to produce fruit. Just like a tulip flower plant is supposed to actually produce the flower. Or a rose plant is supposed to give roses. Or raspberry plants are supposed to give blossom and then ultimately the raspberry itself, the fruit. And this fig tree has no fruit to it. And therefore it's not fulfilling its purpose. In human terms, I think that we have been given the creative opportunity to bear the fruit of love. That's why we were created. That's our most sacred task, to give expression to love in life. And when we are growing in such a ways that we don't actually give expression to love, we're really missing the mark of what we were created for, the purpose of our life. So we might have lots of foliage, but without the fruit of love, we are living essentially a wasted life, and a life that will ultimately shrivel up in the end. Got me thinking about, for you and me, we need to go about actually being involved in creating that kind of fruit. And how do we do that? I have a friend of mine, years ago, I used to go down to his farm. He had an organic vegetable farm for many years. And I'd go down and help him farm every year. Usually I spent about 3 weeks down there every year, mostly in the summer, but once in a while I got there before the summer. And I remember one year going down in the spring when the shoots, the carrot shoots were coming up. He had 1/3 of an acre of carrots, 20 rows wide, maybe 100 feet long. And it took us many days to go through and take out all the little weeds around those little shoots of carrots coming up. If you don't take out the weeds will overwhelm the carrot because you can't use herbicides and pesticides, and there's no fertilizer you can use in this kind of organic farming. So the only way of dealing with the garden, with the carrot garden, is to take out those initial weeds. And when they come back again, the carrot plant's grown enough that it's not in any way affected by them. But there's that little moment where the weeds could overwhelm them. And my friend said to me that he thinks that organic carrots taste better because they have to work harder to grow. Without the blessing of, as I say, fertilizer and herbicides, they have to work much harder than other kinds of carrots to get all that benefit. But they taste sweeter. They taste sweeter. And I don't know about the healthiness of organic and non-organic, but I can tell you this, organic carrots do taste a lot sweeter than the ones we buy in the store. And I'm thinking about, for your life and mine, how when we look retrospectively, we know that often the places where we had the most growth in life, the most growth was when we were most pressed with hard and difficult circumstances, when we had to really fight through the weeds, when we had to really push up against the resistances we experienced in life. And when we managed to break free of them, we experienced a sense of triumph, of success. And they were critical moments in our own development as people. And yet these are the very places that we often flinch away from appropriating for ourselves, or about getting into. When we go about looking for experiences, we want optimal experiences and circumstances. And yet our own day-to-day reality tells us that it's actually the hard and difficult places where we grow the most. Thinking about Alison Redford, the Premier of Alberta, who had just had to resign. This is an immensely talented and gifted woman. But it seems that, as according to one columnist, the critical issue for Alison Redford was that she didn't understand her impact on other people. She was chased from power, Jen Gerson says, because she couldn't understand how others perceived her. And I can really relate to that, because it's really hard for any of us to know how we're perceived by other people, to be sensitive to how our actions impact on other people, how the extension of ourselves into others' lives really feels at the other end of that. And I got thinking about, for you and me, how that often limits our own lives. And we often find ourselves resigning from certain circumstances because we don't understand this. I know of a minister in my past who had to leave a congregation because he didn't really understand how others perceived him. He blamed everybody else for the conflict. He basically justified all that was happening based on what other people did or didn't do, and never owned up to any of the responsibility for what was happening in his own conduct, his own actions. And thinking to myself in that moment, what a missed opportunity for him. If he could get past his self-justifying ways and his defensiveness, there was an opportunity for him to grow in ways that would be hard to imagine. But he was afraid. He was afraid to look in and what he might find. At Trillium, we say what you're going to find is perfection. If you get past all the weeds of your life and all the fear and all the defenses, what's underlying it all is perfect love. The love that needs to get woken up and stirred up in your life. That's the kind of love that wants to grow out of us, that wants to extend out from us like a plant up from the ground. And I pray for you this day that you will embrace these hard and difficult places as opportunities to grow, that you can grow because the source of where you come from is so powerful and so indomitable in its strength that it will burst up past all the weeds of life and give forth shoots of peace and joy and blossom in the flower of love. There's an interesting quote by Murdoch. I love it. It goes, "Love is the extremely difficult realization that something outside of oneself is real." That's probably the hardest lesson to learn in life, that something outside of ourselves is real. I mean, on the one level, it seems pretty obvious, but in our daily experience, it seems that so often we forget this truth. We see the world around us as really some kind of impediment or some kind of resistant place. But in fact, that reality outside of ourselves is real. Imagine connecting with your spouse or your kids or your neighbors or your work colleagues with that real deep understanding that they're real. They're real. They're not just extensions of ourselves. We need to extend love out to that real world outside of us. And when that happens, there is a faith in bloom moment for you. You will experience a kind of growth and a kind of peace, a kind of love that goes beyond our human understanding. Let that be your practice this day. Take seriously the reality of the world outside of you. Be conscious of how you connect with it. Let it be the opportunity for you to grow in your love. Go in that love. Go in peace.